The stars above the Galnari homeworld shimmered like countless diamonds scattered across an endless black cloth. From their peaceful, beautiful planet, the Galnari gazed up into the vast universe, never imagining that the calm of their world would be shattered so suddenly. It had been a century of prosperity since they had first joined the Galactic Alliance, a peaceful community of species that shared knowledge, technology, and resources. But that peace had been broken by the Zelgor Empire. For weeks now, the Zelgor fleet had been circling the Galnari system, cutting off all trade and communication. The Zelgor, known for their ruthless invasions and brutal conquests, were a war-hungry empire that believed in domination through fear. They saw every peaceful planet as a target, every world as a place to conquer, to enslave, to bend to their will. The Galnari were not a warrior race. They had never needed to fight. Their advanced technology and their peaceful ways had always allowed them to negotiate, to talk, to resolve conflicts through dialogue. But the Zelgor didn't want talks. They wanted submission. It began with the blockade. The Zelgor fleet, enormous and terrifying, surrounded the Galnari homeworld. Their ships were like mountains of metal, dark and imposing, with weapons capable of destroying entire cities. The Galnari tried to reason with them, sending diplomats and messages of peace. But the Zelgor warlord, Rukov, had no interest in peace. His demands were simple: surrender all resources or face total annihilation. In their desperation, the Galnari leaders made a choice that would change the course of their future. They activated an ancient system buried deep within their planetary network, a distress signal designed to reach every corner of the galaxy, a call for help to any species willing to answer. "This is the Galnari homeworld," the message began. "We are under attack by the Zelgor Empire. Our people are in danger. We call for help. We beg for help." The signal was broadcast far and wide, to distant worlds and unknown stars. The Galnari held their breath, hoping that someone, anyone, would respond. The message reached the ears of countless species. Many turned their backs. They had their own problems, their own wars, their own struggles. The galaxy was a vast place, and the Galnari were just another small, peaceful race. What could they possibly offer? Some races who had once been allies with the Galnari, including the proud and powerful Zelrixians, simply ignored the call. They had no interest in getting involved in the struggle. They were strong enough to defend their own borders, and they saw the Galnari as weak and unimportant. The Tivar, a technologically advanced species known for their political savvy, listened to the message but refused to intervene. They had no interest in angering the Zelgor Empire, who controlled vast swaths of space. But there was one response, a single unexpected answer to the Galnari's cry for help. The message arrived from Earth. At first, the Galnari couldn't believe it. Earth was a small, young world in the corner of the galaxy, known more for its inhabitants' quirks and unpredictable nature than for any military might. The humans were a curious species, still learning to find their place in the galactic community. They were inexperienced compared to the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. How could they possibly help? Yet the response was clear. The Earth's government, led by President Aiden Stone and General Leonin Hart, decided to send a fleet of ships to assist the Galnari. It was a decision that stunned the galaxy. No one had expected humans to answer the call, but they had. They were not strong or mighty like the other races, but their resolve was unyielding. In the heart of Earth's capital, President Stone paced nervously in his office. The decision had been difficult. Some of his advisors had argued against intervening. The Zelgor were a terrifying force. But Stone, like so many humans, believed in something deeper than mere survival. He believed in fighting for what was right. "We can't let them fall," Stone said, turning to General Hart, who stood by his side. "If we don't help, who will?" General Hart, a man of few words but immense strength, nodded. "I'll organize the fleet. We may not have the firepower of the Tivar or the Zelrixians, but we have something they don't: heart." The decision was made. Earth's military, though smaller than most of the galaxy's powerful fleets, would send a rescue mission to the Galnari. But Earth was no longer a mere bystander in the galaxy. Their warriors, though few in number, were prepared to show the galaxy just what humanity was capable of. Back on the Galnari homeworld, the news of Earth's response came like a ray of light through a storm. The Galnari Council gathered in their vast chambers, their faces a mix of disbelief and hope. "They are coming," one of the leaders whispered. "Humans. They're coming to help us." The Galnari had no illusions about what would happen next. The Zelgor Empire had already made their threats clear. Even with the humans on their side, they were outmatched. But the arrival of the Earth fleet offered something the Galnari hadn't had before: hope. As the first human ships appeared in the skies above the Galnari world, the people stared in awe. They were not huge, colossal warships like the Zelgor had, but they were sleek, with a determination that could be seen from 1,000 light-years away. The humans had come to fight, to stand by their new allies, to prove that even the smallest species in the galaxy could change the tide of war. The battle for the future of the Galnari had only just begun, but now, for the first time, they felt a flicker of hope. Humans had chosen to stand with them when no one else would. This is the first part of the story, setting the stage for humanity's involvement in the galaxy's fight against the Zelgor Empire. Would you like me to continue or make any adjustments to this part? Oh, many too. The decision to send Earth's fleet to the Galnari homeworld was not one taken lightly. In the depths of Earth's government headquarters, President Aidan Stone stood in front of a large display screen, his face set in a determined expression. Around him were his advisors, each one whispering their thoughts and concerns. The hum of discussions filled the room, but it was clear that one question hung in the air. Should they send their fleet to a war they had no part in? For weeks Earth had watched as the Zelgor Empire's forces grew stronger, tightening their grip on nearby systems. The call for help from the Galnari had gone unanswered by most of the galaxy, but one species, Earth, had decided to act. To some it seemed like a foolish risk, but to others it was a call to stand for justice. "We don't know the full strength of the Zelgor," one advisor said nervously. "Their fleet is far larger than anything we've ever faced. This could be a disaster for us." President Stone turned, his sharp eyes meeting the concerned faces of his team. He understood the fear, the uncertainty. Earth had never fought a war like this before. Yet deep down he knew the right thing to do. They had to act, for the sake of the Galnari, for the sake of their own humanity. "This isn't just about fighting a war," Stone replied, his voice steady. "This is about doing what's right. The Zelgor aren't just an enemy to the Galnari. They're an enemy to every peaceful species in the galaxy. If we don't stand up to them now, who will? Our values, our humanity, are worth more than any fear we might have." Another advisor spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "We have the technology, but we're outnumbered. The Zelgor have ships the size of mountains, weapons that can tear through our defenses. Are we prepared to risk everything on an unproven plan?" Stone took a deep breath and glanced over at General Leonin Hart, who had been silent throughout the meeting. Hart was known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering loyalty. The general had seen his share of battles, but this was something different. This was a battle against an enemy with no mercy, no compassion. "General Hart," Stone said, addressing him directly, "what do you think?" The general stood, his broad shoulders squared. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. "We may not have the firepower they do, but we have something they don't," Hart said, his voice low but powerful. "We have the heart, the will to fight for what's right. We fight not for conquest, but for freedom. I believe we can make a difference." His words hung in the air, and for a moment the room was silent. Every advisor knew that Hart was right. Earth wasn't just sending ships into battle, they were sending a message. The galaxy would see that humanity had the courage to stand against oppression no matter the odds. "We'll do it," President Stone said, his voice firm. "We'll send our fleet. We may be small, but together with the Galnari, we'll show The Zelgor that their empire is not invincible. We will fight, and we will win." The room erupted in a mix of cheers and hesitant nods, but there was no turning back now. The decision had been made. The call to action as the fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit. The mood on the ships was a mixture of excitement, fear, and uncertainty. Crew members went through final checks, ensuring that everything was in place. These were not seasoned soldiers who had fought in galactic wars. Many were fresh recruits still learning the ropes. But there was one thing they all shared, a deep sense of duty. Captain Leonin Hart stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Defiant, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space before him. The stars twinkled in the distance, and for a moment, the quiet of space was overwhelming. It was a feeling that could fill anyone with awe, but Hart had no time for awe. They were on a mission, and the lives of millions depended on their success. "Captain Hart, all systems are go," reported his second-in-command, Lieutenant Julia Reyes. Her voice was steady, but there was a hint of nervousness in her eyes. She had never been on a mission like this before, no one had. "We're ready," Hart replied. He turned toward the window, his eyes narrowing. "Prepare for launch. Set course for the Galnari system." The fleet moved in unison, the ships departing Earth's orbit one by one. They weren't as large as the Zelgor vessels, but each ship carried the spirit of humanity with it, a spirit that refused to be crushed. As they traveled through the cold, dark reaches of space, the human fleet received transmissions from Earth's government. There was no going back now. The war had already begun, even if the first battle had not yet been fought. The Galnari await back on the Galnari homeworld. The leaders waited anxiously for the arrival of the human fleet. The news had spread like wildfire across the planet. Earth had responded to their call, but even as hope blossomed, doubt lingered. The Zelgor Empire had wiped out entire civilizations. What chance did humanity have? The Galnari leader, Queen Alara, stood in her chamber, staring out at the horizon. The sky was dark, the stars obscured by the looming shadows of the Zelgor fleet. The people of her world had been living in fear for far too long. The Zelgor were relentless and their cruelty knew no bounds. But now, for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that there was hope. That help was on the way. "They're coming," Alara whispered to herself. "The humans, they're coming." Her advisor Roland entered the room, his face grim. "The human fleet is approaching. We don't know what to expect. Their ships are smaller than the Zelgor, and their technology—" "I don't care about their technology," Alara interrupted. "They came. They chose to stand with us when no one else would. That is worth more than all the weapons in the galaxy." Roland nodded, though his concern remained. "We can only hope they're enough." A moment of unity, the fleet arrived at the edge of the Galnari system, and the first thing Captain Hart noticed was the sheer size of the Zelgor fleet. It was an intimidating sight, hundreds of massive warships hovering ominously above the Galnari homeworld. But Hart was not afraid. He had led many battles before, but this was different. This was a fight for survival, not just for humanity, but for all the peaceful species in the galaxy. "All ships prepare for engagement," Hart commanded, his voice calm but firm. "We fight not just for victory, but for the future of all those who cannot fight for themselves." The ships of Earth's fleet moved into position, ready to face the greatest challenge they had ever known. The Zelgor were about to learn that humanity, though small in numbers, was not a species to be underestimated. This completes part 2 of your story. It sets the stage for the arrival of the human fleet and the initial preparations for the battle against the Zelgor Empire. Would you like me to continue with further parts or make any adjustments to this one? The tension in the air was thick as the human fleet made its way toward the Galnari system. Captain Leonin Hart stood on the bridge of the Defiant, his eyes locked on the view screen as the distant stars stretched before them. The silence was only broken by the hum of the ship's engines. Despite the calmness of space, Hart could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another battle. It was humanity's first real test as a part of the galactic community. Approaching Galnari, "Space Captain," reported Lieutenant Julia Reyes, her voice breaking the silence. Her eyes were glued to her console, fingers dancing across the keys, running final checks before they entered the heart of the conflict. "Understood," Hart said, his voice steady. "Prepare the fleet. We'll need every ship in position once we enter the system." The fleet of human ships, though smaller than the enemy's, moved in formation, their systems fully operational. There were no grand displays of power or showy maneuvers, just disciplined precision. Humanity didn't need to prove itself through overwhelming force. They had something more valuable: determination. Each ship carried a piece of Earth's heart, a reminder that their mission wasn't about domination but survival and freedom for the Galnari. As the fleet moved closer to the Galnari homeworld, Hart couldn't shake the thought that this was more than just a rescue mission. It was a turning point. The fate of the Galnari, and perhaps even the future of peaceful civilizations in the galaxy, hung in the balance. They were going to stand and fight against an empire that had crushed countless others. The Galnari welcome back. On the surface of the Galnari world, the atmosphere was thick with a mixture of hope and fear. The leaders of the Galnari had never seen ships like the ones that now appeared on their planet's monitors. Their initial expectations had been that Earth's ships would be weak and easily outclassed by the Zelgor's massive fleet. But as the human ships arrived in their system, the Galnari could sense something different. The ships were not towering behemoths, but they carried with them a sense of purpose. In the Grand Council chamber, Queen Alara stood before her advisors, gazing at the incoming fleet. Her face, usually composed and calm, now showed the faintest trace of hope. "Are they truly human ships?" Roland, her chief advisor, asked, his voice filled with wonder and disbelief. "They are," Alara replied softly. "I never thought I would see this day. Earth's response was unexpected, but now we see their resolve. They are here to fight." A communications officer stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. "Your Majesty, we are receiving a message from the human fleet. They are ready to begin their coordination with us." Alara nodded, signaling the officer to open the comms. A moment later, the face of Captain Hart appeared on the screen. His expression was firm, his gaze unshakable. Despite the vast difference in their species, Alara couldn't help but respect the strength emanating from him. "Queen Alara," Hart's voice came through, calm and steady. "We are here. The battle may be difficult, but we are ready to fight alongside you. We've come to help." Alara felt a sense of gratitude well up in her chest. It wasn't just the words that mattered. It was the fact that humanity had chosen to stand with them when no one else had. "We will coordinate with your fleet. Please make preparations," Alara responded. "We'll provide you with the information we have on the Zelgor fleet's current position and the defenses they have in place around our world." "Understood. We'll begin with the outer defenses. The rest of the fleet is prepared for a direct assault if necessary." Hart's voice was resolute, but there was something else there, something more than mere military professionalism. There was a deep sense of duty, a call to protect not just an ally, but a people who had no other choice but to depend on Earth's forces. The first battle. The human fleet entered the Galnari system, and the vastness of the Zelgor Empire's warships became painfully clear. Hundreds of massive, imposing vessels loomed in the distance, their dark, angular shapes casting long shadows over the stars. The Zelgor ships were much larger, their weapons capable of devastating entire planets. Yet, despite their overwhelming numbers and superior firepower, something in the air felt different. "We're outnumbered," Lieutenant Reyes muttered, her eyes scanning the fleet on the view screen. "But we can't back down. Not now." Captain Hart didn't need to say anything. He had already made his decision. The humans would fight. All ships prepare to engage. Target their outer defenses first. We'll need to weaken their shield generators before we can go for the main fleet, Hart commanded. The human ships surged forward, cutting through space with precision. Each ship followed its orders to the letter, coordinating with the Galnari forces to strike first at the Zelgor outer defense stations. Despite their smaller size, the human ships were agile, using their speed and tactics to avoid the overwhelming firepower of the Zelgor warships. The battle began with a fierce exchange of fire. The Zelgor retaliated quickly, their weapons lashing out with deadly force, but the human fleet was prepared. They had trained for this moment, practiced every maneuver, and now they put everything they had into their fight for survival. "Keep moving! Don't give them a target!" Hart barked, watching as the Defiant danced through space, dodging blasts from a Zelgor ship that was much larger. The first exchange was a blur of laser beams and explosions, but then something unexpected happened. The Zelgor ships, massive and fearsome, began to show signs of damage. The human ships, though small, were making a difference. They were fast, unpredictable, and relentless. The Zelgor had never faced anything like this before. Their enemies were supposed to be easy prey, yet here they were, a human fleet holding their own. Direct hit on their shield generators. Lieutenant Reyes called out as a Zelgor ship exploded in the distance, its massive form breaking apart. "We've taken down their outer defenses." The humans had made their first strike count. They had sent a message, not just to the Zelgor, but to every species watching from the shadows of space. Humanity might not have been the strongest, but they were brave, and that made them a force to be reckoned with. The Galnari watch as the battle raged on. The Galnari watched from their observation posts. It was impossible not to be amazed at the humans' bravery. They fought not for conquest, but for something more powerful, a sense of justice, of right versus wrong. The Galnari had long since abandoned the hope that they would be saved. Now, Earth had proven them wrong. "I see it now," Queen Alara said softly. "The humans fight because they believe. They fight because they have no choice but to do what is right." Roland stood beside her, his eyes locked on the unfolding battle. "And they will not stop until they have done what they came here to do." The battle between the human fleet and the Zelgor forces had begun, and it was fiercer than anyone had anticipated. The Zelgor, with their enormous warships and overwhelming firepower, expected an easy victory. Yet the humans were proving to be far more resilient than the Zelgor could have imagined. On the Defiant, Captain Leonin Hart stood tall, his eyes scanning the view screen as explosions lit up the cold void of space. The Zelgor ships were massive, but the human fleet was fast, agile, and unpredictable. They moved like a swarm of bees, darting in and out of range, using their smaller size to avoid the Zelgor's deadly fire. "Status report, Lieutenant," Hart commanded, his voice calm but firm. Despite the chaos around them, he remained focused, knowing that their survival depended on clear decisions. Lieutenant Julia Reyes quickly ran her fingers over the console, bringing up data on the fleet's performance. "We've knocked out the outer shield generators on 3 of their ships, Captain. The Zelgor are trying to regroup, but we're disrupting their formations." "Keep the pressure on," Hart ordered. "We need to break their defense before they can retaliate with their full force." The battle was far from over, and every moment brought new challenges. The Zelgor were a ruthless, well-trained force. Their ships were equipped with powerful weapons designed to wipe out entire fleets. Yet, humanity had something the Zelgor had underestimated: an unbreakable will to fight. As the Defiant moved through the chaos, Hart's mind raced. He had led battles before, but this was different. The stakes were higher than ever. Earth's forces were the last hope for the Galnari, and if they failed here, the entire galaxy would suffer. The fate of an entire species rested on their shoulders. The Zelgor's retaliation. The Zelgor, stunned by the unexpected resistance, quickly regrouped. Their warlord, Rukov, watched the human fleet on his tactical display, his eyes burning with anger. How could such a small, insignificant species cause so much trouble? He had underestimated them, but he wouldn't make that mistake again. "Activate all remaining shield generators," Rukov barked to his officers. "Prepare to launch a full assault. Show these humans the power of the Zelgor Empire." The Zelgor warships began to shift into a tighter formation, bringing their massive guns to bear. The weapons of their ships hummed with deadly energy, ready to unleash destruction. "We've got incoming fire, Captain," Reyes called out, her voice tense. "The Zelgor are launching a counterattack." "Brace for impact," Hart ordered. "Deploy the defensive shields full power." The Defiant shuddered as blasts from the Zelgor ship struck their shields. causing the whole vessel to vibrate. The crew felt the hit, but they held their ground. Humanity's ships were small compared to the Zelgors, but their shields were built with Earth's best technology holding firm under the bombardment. "Return fire. Take out their weapons," Hart commanded, his hands gripping the console tightly. The human fleet retaliated, their lasers and missile strikes striking the Zelgor ships with precision. It wasn't enough to destroy the Zelgor's massive ships, but it was enough to slow them down. The battle wasn't just about brute force, it was about tactics, patience, and striking when the opportunity arose. "Target their engines next," Hart instructed. "If we take out their propulsion systems, they won't be able to maneuver and we can pick them off one by one." The Defiant and the rest of the fleet moved in unison, circling the Zelgor ships and attacking their engines. Slowly but surely, the human fleet began to turn the tide of battle. The Zelgor, though far larger and more heavily armed, were starting to show signs of vulnerability. The Galnari watched back on the Galnari homeworld. The people watched in awe as the battle unfolded. The once terrifying Zelgor fleet, which had dominated their skies for weeks, was now struggling against the human forces. The Galnari had never expected such an outcome. They had always seen themselves as weak and vulnerable, reliant on other species for protection. But humanity, despite its small size and lack of galactic power, had come to their aid, and now they were fighting not just for survival, but for the future of the entire galaxy. Queen Alara watched the battle from her command center, her eyes filled with hope. She had never seen such courage before. The humans were not just fighting, they were fighting with everything they had. "This is it," Alara whispered to Roland, her voice filled with both wonder and disbelief. "They're doing it. They're holding their ground against the Zelgor." Roland nodded, his gaze never leaving the screen. "I never thought I would see this day. The Zelgor were supposed to be unstoppable." "They are not," Alara said, a fire igniting in her chest. "Not when they face humanity." The turning point. The battle raged on for hours, and the Zelgor Empire began to feel the effects of the human tactics. Their shields were weakening, their formations broken, and their ships were losing power. Rukov, the Zelgor warlord, could no longer ignore the relentless assault from the humans. "Retreat," Rukov hissed through clenched teeth. "Pull back and regroup. We'll need reinforcements before we can crush these insects." The Zelgor began to fall back, their massive ships retreating to a safer distance. It was a humiliating retreat, something the Zelgor had never been forced to do. The human fleet, though smaller and outnumbered, had proven their worth. They had held their ground and forced the Zelgor into a retreat, marking a turning point in the battle. "Don't let them escape," Hart commanded, his voice calm but filled with determination. "We need to finish this now. Lock onto their engines. Prepare for one final strike." The human fleet moved forward, not giving the Zelgor any chance to recover. With their engines targeted and their ships struggling to maintain formation, the Zelgor were finally in a position to be defeated. One by one, the human ships picked off the remaining Zelgor vessels, each blast a small victory in the larger war for freedom. As the last of the Zelgor warships fled into the depths of space, a cheer went up among the human fleet. The battle had been long and brutal, but the humans had emerged victorious. A victory for humanity. On the Galnari homeworld, the people erupted in celebration. It was a victory they had never thought possible. The humans had not only fought with courage, they had won. Queen Alara stood before her people, her heart swelling with pride. "Today, we have witnessed something incredible," she said, her voice strong. "The humans did not come to conquer us. They came to save us. And now we are free." The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Zelgor Empire would regroup, and the fight would continue. But now the Galnari knew they were not alone. With humanity by their side, they had a chance at survival. They had hope, and hope in a galaxy filled with darkness was something worth fighting for. This part covers the human fleet's continued struggle against the Zelgor Empire and their eventual success in forcing the Zelgor to retreat. Would you like to continue with the next part, or would you prefer any adjustments to this section? The victory over the Zelgor fleet was a momentous achievement, but it was far from the end of the war. While the human fleet had forced the Zelgor into a retreat, the warlord Rukov was far from defeated. His forces were numerous, and he would not give up so easily. However, the humans' unexpected success had given the Galnari and their new allies a small, but significant, breathing space. Back aboard the Defiant, Captain Leonin Hart stood before a holographic map of the Galnari system. He could see the position of the remaining Zelgor ships in the distance, regrouping after their humiliating retreat. It was clear that the Zelgor were not going to give up. Hart knew they had only won a single battle and that more were coming. "Lieutenant Reyes," Hart said, turning to his second-in-command, "I need a full assessment of the remaining Zelgor forces. What are we up against?" Reyes tapped away on her console, her fingers flying over the controls as she analyzed the data. The Zelgor are not just retreating to regroup, they've already started rebuilding their formation. They're holding back in the outer rim of the system, trying to lure us into a trap. They'll have reinforcements in a few hours. Hart gripped the edge of the table, his jaw tightening. The Zelgor were not like other enemies they had fought. They didn't care about honor or mercy, they only cared about victory. Humanity's tactics had been successful so far, but the next encounter would be even more dangerous. "I need a plan," Hart said, looking up at his crew. "We cannot let them regroup." At that moment, a voice from the communications officer interrupted the tense silence. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Galnari leadership. It's marked urgent." "Put it through," Hart replied. The image of Queen Alara appeared on the screen, her face a mixture of relief and concern. She wasted no time with pleasantries. "Captain Hart, we are grateful for your success. However, the Zelgor are not just a threat to our people. We have something that may help." "What do you mean?" Hart asked. His curiosity piqued. "We've kept a weapon hidden for centuries," Alara said. "It's a last resort, a weapon that could turn the tide of this war. But it is dangerous, and we have never used it before." Hart raised an eyebrow. "You've been hiding a weapon?" "Not just any weapon," Alara replied. "It is a technology that can destabilize the very energy fields that power the Zelgor ships. We believe it may be able to disable their fleet entirely, but we cannot use it without knowing its full effects." A weapon that could disable the Zelgor's fleet sounded too good to be true. Hart was cautious. "What's the catch?" Alara hesitated. "The weapon requires a great deal of energy. It would put a strain on our entire planet's resources, and there's no guarantee it will work. We could damage ourselves in the process." Hart looked back at the map, thinking hard. This was a gamble. But he knew that the Zelgor would come, again stronger than before. He couldn't afford to hesitate. "We'll take that risk," Hart said, his voice firm. "If it means we can end this war, we'll do whatever it takes." Alara nodded. "We will prepare the weapon, but it will take time to activate. In the meantime, you must hold the line. The Zelgor will be preparing for their final assault." "We'll be ready," Hart said, turning to his crew. "Lieutenant Reyes, coordinate with the Galnari. We'll need to know the precise location of the weapon once it's ready. We don't have time to waste." On the calm before the storm. The next few hours were tense. The human fleet held its position, awaiting the weapon's activation. Despite their success in the previous battle, there was no underestimating the Zelgor. They were regrouping, planning their next move. It was only a matter of time before they launched a full-scale assault on the Galnari homeworld. Captain Hart stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The vast emptiness of space stretched before them, silent and still. But Hart knew that this calm would not last. The storm was coming, and the fate of the Galnari, and perhaps the entire galaxy, rested on the outcome of the next battle. "Captain," Reyes said, breaking his thoughts, "we've received an update from the Galnari. The weapon is almost ready for activation. They're just running a few final tests." Hart nodded, but there was little comfort in the news. He knew the Zelgor would not wait for the weapon to be ready. They would come at them with everything they had. "I've prepared our fleet," Hart said, his voice steady. Once the weapon is ready, we'll move in and hold the Zelgor off as long as we can. We can't afford to give them a chance to regroup. Understood, Captain, Reyes replied, her eyes focused on the tactical readouts. We've got the defensive perimeter set up. The Galnari will be ready to activate the weapon once we give the signal. Hart took a deep breath, staring out at the stars. It was hard to believe that just days ago, Earth had been a quiet planet, unaware of the galactic battles unfolding beyond its borders. Now humanity was at the center of a fight for survival. They had joined the galactic community, not as conquerors, but as protectors, fighting for the freedom of those who could not defend themselves. Captain, the communications officer said, we're receiving a transmission from the Zelgor. Fleet, it's an encrypted message. Put it through, Hart said, curiosity piqued. The screen flickered, and the face of Warlord Rukov appeared. His expression was cold, his eyes filled with hatred. Humans, Rukov spat, his voice dripping with contempt. You are nothing. You dare to challenge the might of the Zelgor. Empire? Your feeble fleet is no match for us. Leave this system now or we will destroy you. Hart's expression remained unchanged. You had your chance to leave, Rukov. Now it's time for you to face the consequences. Rukov's lips curled into a sneer. This is not over, human. You will regret this decision. The transmission ended abruptly, and Hart turned to his crew. Prepare for the final battle. The Zelgor are coming, and this time, we finish it. The final assault. The final battle was about to begin. The Zelgor fleet, massive and intimidating, was moving toward the Galnari system, and the human fleet was ready to face them. The Galnari, having completed their weapons activation, had prepared to unleash its devastating power, but the question remained, would the weapon work as promised? Would it be enough to stop the Zelgor? Or would they find themselves fighting for their very survival, with no more tricks up their sleeves? Hart knew that no matter what happened next, the future of the Galnari, and perhaps all of humanity, depended on this moment. The stakes couldn't be higher. And as the Zelgor ships moved closer, he gave the order. All ships, engage. This part sets up the anticipation for the final confrontation, with the humans awaiting the activation of the weapon to disable the Zelgor fleet. It also touches on the tension between Hart and Rukov, setting the stage for the climactic battle. Would you like to continue with the next part or adjust anything in this section? Oh, Minnie,